Hello, I hope you guys are doing well. I am hoping that the semester, as it is coming to a close, is treating you well. There's a couple things that I wanted to uh, look at and talk about tonight, and talk about the cocoon thing quite a bit, as well as talk about the paper mache assignment, and then the rest of the stuff that we need to talk about. One person did turn in the um, the PowerPoint for the artist, and we're going to watch that as well. If you haven't done that, go back and look at uh, the assignments that have been due and get that done as soon as you can. There are a couple of people that still will have both service learning and artist research assignments showing up for modules 7A, 7B, and 7C because they have not declared which one they're going to be doing. And that's three different people. So please look at that. I think it is too late to do consider service learning if you haven't made that decision. I would say just stick with the artist research, declare that, and remove those other ones from your list of assignments that are due. I have had a couple people that have changed what they want to do, and were actually started doing a service learning project instead of the artist research, and that's no problem at all. You can change if you need to, but at this stage, we're late enough that it's going to be very difficult to get people to connect with you and respond to you if you want to do the service learning. So I would recommend, if you haven't made up your mind at this point, just go ahead and do the artist research and stick with that. And let me show you what I'm talking about. If I can find it here. All right, here we go. Let me show you exactly what I'm talking about. Now I'm sharing it with you the page. It's our home page and it has all the modules here. And what I'm talking about is right here in 7A. If you look at this, there's the artist research that everybody needs to do, the artist list that everybody needs to read, the artist list that everybody needs to do, the first do no harm that everybody needs to look at. This is a video. You need to watch that video. Then this assignment right here, it says artist research or service learning. We click on that. Oh, it looks like two more people have done it. So there's only one person remaining that needs to do this and turn it in. But it's a very short assignment. All you've got to do is declare if you're going to be doing artist research or service learning. And so that one remaining person, I would say just pick the artist research route. And what that means is that as soon as you pick, I will go through and right here where it says artist research or service learning, that's what I'm talking about. If you pick service learning, then I go through and take you off the list of all the artist research options. If you do artist research, then I take you off of all the service learning options. So you'll do either one or the other in each of these modules that are labeled 7A, 7B, and 7C. If we go down and look at 7B, right here we have one artist research, that's the annotated bibliography, and then two service learning projects that are each worth half the number of points of the artist research. Again, if you pick artist research, I take these off your list of to-do things. If you pick service learning, I take artist research off. Then we go down to 7C. This is where the PowerPoint presentations and descriptions of the projects. If you do, again, if you pick the service learning project, you don't have to do the artist research. If you pick the artist research, you don't have to do the service learning. And that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. So we only have one person remaining that needs to make that declaration. Please, it is, the semester is almost over. Please do do that right away so that I can go back and remove those other assignments from your list of things to do. Now, the other things that we're going to be talking about today is I'm noticing that people are turning in their texture and light things. That is great. Keep doing that. And we'll talk about those a little bit today as well. But the main thing I want to talk about today is I want to remind people about the paper mache. And it doesn't look like anybody has finished that. When you've done the carving, you need to do the paper mache as soon as you can. All right. It is due on uh, this Sunday. And with that, and after you do that paper mache, we're also doing the contemporary processes thing, and people have been turning in the ready-mades, the conceptual and art. So we're going to look at those. And then I want to spend some time and talk about the colorful cocoon or wrapped object. Now, each of these, they don't take an awful lot of time. They're mostly thought exercises, and that is just fine. But we're going to look at what people have turned in. And right, that's what we'll look at right there. And then we'll look at those in just a minute. So here's the discussion board, and we'll just scroll down and look at what people have turned in on that in just a moment. About those, and I wanted to talk a little bit more about conceptual art and talk more about the cocooning so that people are more familiar and comfortable with that, so you can do that this week. So I would like to look at, before we go on anymore, I want to take a little bit of a break and look at the PowerPoint that was turned in by Griffin this week. And then after that, I want to look at the discussions for the biomorphic carvings that everybody did and just remind people a little bit about that. So let me connect with the share a screen feature. See if we can do that. All right, hopefully everybody can see this. And we'll make sure that the sound is on. Okay. And let's make sure that everybody can read this as well. Or not read it, I'm sorry, listen to it. Okay, it looks like to me that Griffin, um, I you need to double check the sound and make sure that that is working. I don't know. I have all the sound stuff here. I will look at it a little bit more and I will try to get it sorted out by next week. But if you are Griffin, it looks like the sound is not working on this. So please double check your file and see if it is corrupted. The reason why I did not double check that before this class is I just opened it just moments before this class to check on it. So it looks like it's going to be a good presentation, but it looks like the sound part of the file is corrupted, so we can't get any noise. So please, if that is your presentation, go back and double check it, and then after this class, I will also email and write a note to that effect too. So give me just a second here. Okay, I just wrote a note asking that individual to double check the file and resend me a cleaned up version and see if that will work. So, all right. So the next thing we're going to look at is the discussion on the biomorphic carvings, where we have images of each of the carvings. And the reason why I want to do this is because in order to get full points for this, what everybody needs to do is contribute photos just like this. These are good, solid photos. And then they also need to make comments on the work of three other people. And that's about what the comments need to look like. There are 40 words, and each of them need to have three things in their comments. And if we go to that discussion, the explanation of the discussion, the three comments that you've got to include in your 40-word statement is how did this involve the viewer? How how did they develop interesting, engaging shapes? And how do they follow principles we discussed regarding biomorphic abstraction? As long as you have those three things, and everybody who's made comments has done that, then you get the points. Uh, and it also needs to be um, at least 40 words long right there. So when you do this, if you haven't done both parts of the discussion yet, you won't get points for both parts of this discussion. It is 10 points, I believe, and half of those come from the photo like this, and half of those come from making the comments. So if you haven't made the comments yet, you need to do that as soon as you can. And I just want to show the carving, and then this person also needs to make comments. And this has images of the carving, but they also have the comments. And so this person would get full points because they did both things. Carving, comments, right? So I hope that everybody understands that. That is important. You're going to miss the points if you don't do it. And there's no reason for anybody in the class to miss any of the points. Uh, as long as you go back through and submit stuff that hasn't been turned in yet, resubmit stuff that I make comments on, and do everything that's outlined in the assignment parameters, you're going to get a good grade in the class. So there are several people that are missing a number of assignments. Go back through. I'm going to be going through again and getting all the grading up to date. Everything that I get, everything that's late, I'm going to put a 0 on. So your Canvas interface will remind you that you've got to get it turned in. Get it turned in. Even if it's not the way you want it, because of this class, you can always work on something, update it, and then resubmit it to get more points. So there's no reason not to turn stuff in. And there are several people that have taken advantage of that who revisited that carving that we looked at, that the biomorphic abstraction carving, updated it, and then resubmitted, and they got more points. So I am more than happy to do that. Now, if you have resubmitted stuff, or like for example, you've retaken a quiz, different things like that, uh, and I haven't regraded it, let me know right away. With the quizzes, you can either retake the entire thing, or if it's only missing like one or two sections, you can update that and make the correction in the assignment discussion on the quiz. And then you'd have to email me because I don't see the notices when people update the discussions. So there is, if you go to the quiz page, let's see, I'm gonna see if I can find that for you right now. All right, if we go to one of the quizzes, and I'll share with you my view again. We can go down here. I'll just open one of the quizzes, do the preview. On this, if you happen to miss, like you've got all the points except for you missed on number one, which is the most calm and peaceful line, and you wrote horizontal. Instead of having to retake the entire quiz, what you can do is there's going to be a dialog box to the right here that lets you know which answers are wrong and what to do about them. You can just type in below my comments saying, for this one, question number one, the answer is actually horizontal. And then send that to me and then email me because I don't always see those discussion elements when people make comments on, I guess they're not discussions, they're comments on the assignment. Email me and I will go back and take care of it as soon as I see your email. And that is really, yes, you have to go a little bit out of your way, but big deal. You're going to get more points. Uh, and if I'm not responding right away after you've resubmitted something, again, just email me and remind me if I haven't responded to the Canvas thing. Is over this weekend, it was really weird because I was checking Canvas every day, the Canvas email, and I didn't see anything. And I was checking the university email, and over the weekend, I cleared everything out. And then Monday morning, I looked at it, and there was a whole bunch of stuff in there that I hadn't seen over the weekend. For some reason, sometimes there is a lag. So if I'm not responding right away to Canvas, email me directly on my university account, and that address is in the syllabus, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Or you can text me on my phone, and the phone number is in the syllabus as well as the instructor information page. And either way, when I see that, I will get back to you as soon as I can. And if it's more than a day or so after you email me, I'd say go ahead and text because for whatever reason, sometimes the email is just lacking. I'm sorry, it's lagging, moving a little bit slower than I expect. I've also noticed that I really appreciate that Mabel suggested to send out the photos for the quizzes. I've I've been doing that, and I've updated all the photos across the board, and it looks like everything was working, except as I was grading quizzes this weekend that people were turning in, um, there were a couple where several in a row had all the photos showing up, and then one of them didn't. And I have no idea why that would happen because when I'm grading, I should be able to see the same thing that is the quiz is updated to. And I was grading it through the Canvas interface and everything, and for whatever reason, the photos weren't showing up. So if you have not been or have not received the PDF that has the photos for the quizzes on it, and your interface is not showing the updated photos, um, double check your Canvas email. And if you can't find the PDF anywhere, let me know by either emailing me or texting me, and I will get it sent to you. So like I said, there's absolutely no reason that everybody can't get all the quizzes done. They can't get all the assignments done. They can't get everything updated and sent in. Um, Last semester, there were a number of people that had full-time jobs and they were really behind, but they pulled it through in April and they were able to get everything turned in and they walked away with A's and B's, which is really exceptional. All right, so I hope that helps with that. That was one big thing that I wanted to talk about. Now, when we look at another part of the assignment that is due, or another assignment that is due, is applying paper mache to the sculptures. And I, I'm sharing that, but I also want to share something else. Let's see. Okay, let's see if we can find this. Oh, that's weird. I did want to um, look at another sculpture really quick that was done by somebody in the class and just talk about it really briefly. I did talk about it to the person. I don't know if they've seen it yet, but this is one of the sculptures that was turned in, and I really love what you guys have done with the form. I'm talking about this, it ties into the paper mache. But on this, you can see that it looks really fuzzy. And what I would, for this person, go back through with the sandpaper and make sure that you've gotten rid of the tool marks. It looks like the tool marks are pretty much gone on this one. But if your stuff is fuzzy because the sandpaper, and it looks like this may need to be rounded a little bit up here, but if it's fuzzy because the sandpaper is pulling the foam away, all you do the best you can. And if I take off points because it doesn't look very smooth, and it is because you've been trying, and like a shape like this, you don't want to take a whole lot more away, then just let me know you've done the best you can, and it's the sandpaper that's doing that, and you'll get those points. On this, you can see there is a little bit of tool mark chatter right through here, and that needs to be sanded down as much as possible. Just do the best you can. Now, if it's fuzzy like this after you've sanded it down, and it's just because the sandpaper is a little bit too coarse and the foam is making these weird shapes, chunks of foam are pulling away with the sandpaper, you can't really do anything about that. But what you can do when you start paper macheing is be really careful when you do your first layer of paper mache, make sure that the newspaper is good and wet and you get the glue smeared in with your fingers so that the paper itself, as it dries, will kind of smooth this out. And then you can sand it carefully again to get all those wrinkles out. And then when you do your second coat of paper mache, a lot of this stuff will be gone. So that's something that I think is really important to talk about as we move forward with the remainder of this project, this part aspect of our projects. We've got to make sure that the paper mache is smooth. Let's say okay. So you submit it here, the paper mache thing, and what I'm trying to do is get to where that video is, where I demonstrate paper mache. Okay, introduction to paper mache. I want you to look at these shapes. And you can tell that this person was really careful with the abstraction, the biomorphic abstraction. It looks very organic. It looks like it's something where it's a weird set of alien bones that are somehow fused together or something. And I love that. That's what we're going at. Looking at things that are inspired by bones and thick leaves and coral and different elements like that. One thing that I want you to really look at is if we zoom in on these, you can tell that the person sanded it down and made it pretty smooth. There was a good question last week from somebody said, well, do we have to sand it down to the foam again? Well, no. What I'm talking about, when you do the first layer, let it dry overnight, what you need to do with your sandpaper is go through, and if there are wrinkles and things like that, or air bubbles, you sand those down. And once you get rid of those, and you can see that some of the areas right here, there's like wrinkles and stuff that are sanded down. That's why it looks like that. Once you get rid of those, then apply your second layer of paper mache, and it will make this really smooth and very strong. Sharon put in Elmer's wood glue on this, or Gorilla wood glue, and that makes it so that once this dries, it is incredibly sturdy. And here I recommend you go to check out an artist. He calls himself the Gourmet Paper Mache guy. And what I need you to do as you work on this is pay attention to the material itself as you are applying it, because this is the reason you are applying the paper mache to your foam is that you can paint and apply texture to it. It's very hard to get the foam to receive paint. So if you go to, and the I think it is 54 where I start demonstrating the paper mache. And I know it is kind of frustrating. A lot of the stuff is out of the frame, but what I, I'm demonstrating is how to mix it and how to mix the paper mache glue itself and then how to apply the paper. I was dumb when I did this and I did not wear gloves. I would highly recommend that you wear gloves, just like plastic latex or the latex surgical style type gloves, just so that it doesn't get that sticks to your skin or dries out your skin. And generally, what I notice works pretty well is if you do half of each of the materials, you get plaster, or I'm sorry, flour. That's what's in that white stuff in that bag. And then the other bag should have the glue in it. And you just put half of both of those in, and then you pour in enough water that's about the same volume of the glue that you used. And you can mix a little bit more, put a little bit more water in if you need to, but you need the gloves on because you're going to be squishing the lumps between your fingers to get this as smooth as possible. And what I would recommend is you mix this stuff together a good hour before you're actually going to start doing the paper mache. Mix it together, get as many of the lumps out as you possibly can, let it sit for an hour, and then with the lid on, and then go back and start putting your newspaper or paper towels through it. And I found newspaper works really, really, really well. And sometimes people have used paper towel strips, and that seems to work pretty well too. But if you tear the strips top of the page to the bottom, you can get some pretty long straight lines torn because that's the way that the grain of the paper lays. And tearing the stuff with the grain of the paper really helps quite a bit. So I'm demonstrating how to mix this, put a little bit of water in it, mix and get the bubbles out, and see how far that takes you. And this, from a lot of experimentation, we've noticed that most of the time, if not all the time, the amount that you're given in the kit is about what you need, plus a little bit extra. And again, do not pour this down the sink. That is absolutely vital. So I'm mixing a little bit. I'm kind of playing around with how much flour I get in there, but it's usually going to be about half your flour and half your glue, and then the same volume of water as the volume of your glue. Mix it around with your fingers, and then uh, after you cut your newspaper in strips, run it through the paper mache, the glue material, excuse me. We need the strips because when you wrap the paper around your foam, it's not going to stay. It won't stay. But if you have the strips long enough, you can wrap them around the foam so that one end can overlap the other part of the glued on strip. And when it overlaps itself, it gives itself something to hook onto, and you've basically just made a loop around the foam because the paper mache does not stick well to the foam. But as you go through and do that to the whole structure, everything will be covered with the paper mache. Let it dry overnight, sand it so it's smooth, and then do a second coating on it. And then after that dries overnight, sand it again. And everybody should have this done by Sunday. And then the rest of the semester, what you're going to do is play around with ideas of using the color and texture techniques that you developed as you were doing the color and texture tiles. So you see that the the texture itself or the viscosity of this mixture is going to be a lot thinner than glue, but it's going to be a lot thicker than water. And it should be about like a melted McDonald's milkshake. You know, a melted milkshake from most different places is about the thickness or viscosity of it is that you're going to be going with. So here I have the newspaper, believe it or not, and I'm tearing strips, and you can't see it because I you can hear it if you turn the sound on. But I hope that everybody found free newspapers on campus. But so I've just taken a page out, and I'm looking at my fingers because they got really super sticky with the glue. But notice that I'm pairing, now this, I just pinched it right in the middle of the fold, and I tore down the page, and I got a long strip pretty easily. And I'm tearing those like that specifically so I don't have a whole bunch of paper to have to deal with as I wrap it around the foam. So I'm cutting more strips, and then I'm going to take this and start applying them. And one of the things that you'll notice as you watch this, incredibly wonderful video is that I'm smushing, I'm using my fingers to smush that material or the glue around, the glue, water, and flour around. You can see kind of how thin it is. It's a lot thinner than regular glue. It does get everywhere. That's one of the reasons you can't see it, but this table I have covered with just a big black garbage bag, and um, and I'm just carefully applying the strips. And by smearing it around like that, as the material is still wet, I can get in there and cover a lot of those issues where the sandpaper just pulls the foam out and gives it that funky, fuzzy kind of texture. And just go around the whole thing like that. I think something this size may take you 45 minutes to an hour, if that, to apply the paper mache. But go all over, do the entire thing, and then sand it down. You can see I'm still massaging different areas and things like that, and experiment with paper, the strip widths. One thing that I've noticed if there is a tight curve that you're trying to get covered with paper, the narrower the strip, the less wrinkles you'll have. The wider the strip, the more wrinkles you'll have. If it's a really tight area that you're trying to cover. The broader, more open areas, you can go a little bit wider. I wouldn't go any wider than about inch and a half on the strips, and I wouldn't go any narrower than about a half an inch on the strips. Narrower than that, and just the weight and sogginess of the glue are enough to tear through the material. But you can see how that is slowly building up. And yeah, there are glue blobs and stuff like that on um, the foam, but you can smear those around with your fingers. It is kind of messy. That's why you'd probably want to wear um, nasty pants, but you definitely want to have a garbage bag on the table so when you're all done, you can just wrap everything up and throw it away with the garbage bag. And you can see every time I do this, every time I get the newspaper in the paper mache and then kind of squeegee the excess out, I'm also getting rid of lumps. And so by the time I get um, about a quarter of the way through applying the paper mache, most of the stuff that I made, most of the paper mache glue that I've made is lump free. It, it just happens to work out that way. All right. So I'm going back to share that page again. But I wanted to do that because I noticed that nobody has done their paper mache or turned in paper mache thing yet. And that is the next step and it's really important that you get this done as soon as you can. Right here is very important. Do not pour leftover stuff down the drain. Don't ever do that with the paper mache. If you don't use it all, put the lid on it. One thing that I have done before is I've taken a lot of my garbage and put in that container with the paper mache glue, and then put the lid on it and throw the whole thing away. And that seems to be the easiest way to do it. And you want to, when you do throw it away, you want to make sure it's in a plastic bag because otherwise it will leak everywhere. Even if it has a perfect seal on it, if it's not in a plastic bag when you throw it away, it's going to leak. That's just the way the universe works. So I talk through how to mix it and everything like that, and I talk about how to do it. And Some people have used cloth strips. Um, some people have tried to use magazine strips. I would recommend against magazine. And the reason is that magazines are manufactured with either a plastic or a clay coating, so they are less water absorbent. And what that means for you is when you try to tear the pages for your paper mache and try to get them wet and stuff like that, the paper mache glue does not soak into the magazine pages, for one, and then also the printing on top of the magazine pages, most of that ink, those different colors and stuff like that, will roll right off and get on your fingers. Which not a big deal if you're wearing gloves. That's fine. If you don't wear gloves, it can stain your fingers. So I would not use magazines. But cloth strips, like really nasty old sheets, people have used those. I would have a tendency to stay away from cloth strips because that involves a lot more sanding for you. Unless that's a texture you really, really like, I would try to stay away from cloth strips. The paper towels, you can use those, but they're a little bit tricky because it is a lot lighter strength of paper than the newspaper, and sometimes it'll start tearing just with the weight of the glue in the paper towel material itself. Uh, the tougher paper towels, the hardier paper towels like brawny and stuff like that, they will sometimes work. But again, because paper towels do have a little bit of texture to it, it can be a little bit more of a pain in the butt to sand. And that's why my first choice is always newspaper strips, as much as you possibly can do. And you want to work the newspaper in or the paper mache into every crack and crevice of the sculpture that you make, of the sculpture that you're covering. You want to get it just as tight in there as you possibly can, because we want the paper mache specifically is intended as a coating so you can paint and add texture. I don't want it to hide the work that you did in your carving. So, do the best you can, get that paper mache worked in there and worked in really well. Okay, so that is that. Now, one thing I'm gonna go to modules again. I hope that everybody gets that and understands that about paper mache. We talked about it quite a bit last week and this week. So please make sure if you have any issues with it, let me know. But I'm hoping that even the people among you that haven't worked with paper mache, watch the videos and stuff like that that I linked to, and hopefully that will help take care of whatever concerns you have. Now, we did talk quite a bit about contemporary processes last week. I want to talk a little bit more about, I want to do a preview of the quiz. I want to talk through this a little bit, and I want to answer whatever questions people have. But then I want to talk about what conceptualism is again, just remind people of our discussion last week, and then show examples of what people have been turning in for the Readymade project. I think they're really interesting. Okay, this first question should be pretty easy for most of you who have had work with 2D or digital art, but all this material is in the textbook. And Roy G. Biv, that's another reference to color, the colors of the rainbow. And this, of course, we're talking about Marcel Duchamp, which is pretty amazing conceptual artist, but he did a lot of really pioneering, groundbreaking things. And then, and found materials. I use a lot of found materials in my work, and some of the photos that you've seen of my sculptures and things like that, I will look for something sometimes for months, going to different antique places and stuff like that to find just the exact right thing. Sometimes I'll find stuff on eBay and other places like that, but I love finding stuff like that because somebody else has already lived with it for a long time. And there's memories that somebody else has had with that associated with it. And the term that I like to think about ready-made objects with is having happy ghosts. And sometimes there are bad stuff with it associated with it, but most of the time, the things that I use, I try to find stuff that feels like it has happy ghosts, where it was used by somebody who enjoyed using it. And I love going to Cat's Cradle in Provo. I love going to Gypsy Emporium in in Hurricane, Utah, and just there's a and in Scipio, there's a really lovely um, antiques shop that is just a lot of fun to go to. There's the Quilted Bear. There's just fun places like that. And sometimes if I can't find an object that already has happy ghosts attached to it, so it looks worn and used, I will go and just look at stores that have cool knick-knack stuff. Target used to be really good for that. Not so much anymore, I found. But I love to go to things like Desert Industries is really fun. Goodwill. I just enjoy finding stuff that has those associations with it. And one of the reasons I use um, Readymades like this that I find and then provide new context for is because there is an association with um, importance that when we see something that has been carefully worn, um, there is an association we have that's important to somebody, or it was important to somebody. Somebody used it all the time. And I think that subliminally, when somebody sees that in work that you do, in a sculpture that you make or something, they want, most people will feel themselves wanting to lean forward and listen to it a little bit more. They find it more engaging and interesting on some level, or they're more willing to take a second look because they can tell that this thing has been used. That's something to consider. And I think it's that's really interesting. With this, one thing that I noticed with this is um, there's several people missed one or two, and it's just because these things were not spelled correctly. And so I went through and I gave those points back. If you know have the word, but it's spelled differently. But sometimes people would do things like split complementary instead of triad, or the other way around, or discord instead of tetrad. So just if you're missing anything, just double check which color scheme it is. And then the other thing was right here. Are these natural or artificial? You know, are they natural or applied? And like that's a natural patina of the stone. This is definitely applied. But this one is a little weird because the person is using the leaves. However, Andy Goldsworthy selected the leaves for their color and applied them as if he was painting. So even though these leaves are natural, the way that Andy Goldsworthy used them in this is applied. So something to think about. And I really appreciate what people had to say about these two images. And Frank Crow, all of you had really good things to say about this. And I really am very appreciative of everything that people said about these two things. Because George Segal, he used a lot of times when he did use color, he used very solid colors and very strong colors. And I thought all of you guys did a great job talking about the psychological use of color, you know, and what these colors, blue, red, green, and white, what they typically mean, coupled with how the person was sitting, you know, and their environment. So I thought you guys did a great job on that. So if you didn't get a perfect score on this quiz, most of the time it's going to be something like that. If you misspelled the color scheme, I took care of that already, and you got points for it. And anything else I wrote in the conversation box as to which questions were missing a point or two. So I'm going to go back to modules. And I'm just going to scroll down a little bit to right here. We're talking about contemporary processes and things like that. Um, these are many different artists. Some of these are purely conceptual. Some of them will do the cocooning and wrapping. And I want you to go through and look at all of them because each of them will, and a few of them also do assemblage art where they use Readymades and you put the Readymades together in new configurations. And that is something that I think is really important to look at and see how they're doing that. So last week we talked about One in Three Chairs by Joseph Kosuth, and I just think he's a great introduction to this kind of contemporary art process because we talked about conceptualism last week, that pretty much every piece of art on some level is conceptual because you're depending on you want to engage the viewer somehow. You want them to think about your work somehow. And the difference is that conceptual art is specifically designed to be something that impacts a person's thoughts. We're not talking about manipulation. We're talking about creating an environment where the viewer, is really incentivized to start thinking about what they see in front of them. Dadaists were really good at this, and Marcel Duchamp did some things that were considered very Dada. But that's why we have this wooden chair here. We have a black and white documentary style photo of this exact same wooden chair in this setting. And you can see that it is the exact same chair. And then we have the description of the chair. So you have three different perspectives on what a chair might be, and all of them point to this real chair. But from what we see, it's still just a photo. In this case, it's a color photo of a chair. And the whole thing is designed to create an environment for people to start asking about, well, is this art? And if it isn't, why? If it is, why? What is it making me think about? What is a chair? And in addition to that, questions about what is a chair, what is reality? What is a definition? How much impact can a definition make if it points to something that's unclear? Or, what good is a chair if I see this as a photo and I can't sit on it, what good is it? So all these kinds of questions are really interesting. It ties directly back into Plato's allegory of the cave, which one of the things that the allegory of the cave talks about is what is the nature of of reality? And I think Wassily Kandinsky in his Spirituality and Art also brought up the question of, what is your responsibility? What is our responsibility as an artist in that conversation? So I love all those kinds of questions. And for this, so definitely, I hope everybody's watched that video and irritated your roommates and family with starting discussions about it. And this interview with Marcel Duchamp is just excellent, where he talks about what he was doing. And then this assignment has two parts. One is you take a photo of something. And remember, we wanted the photo to be dramatic. We want the photo to give it the object, to give the object new context or meaning. And then you write three paragraphs. In the first one, you talk about what the object or origination story is. Second one, you talk about the title and what you did to give it new context. And then the third is just an explanation of whether or not it's its own art piece. So we do have several different examples that I want to look at. And I apologize. I'm going to try to hide the names of the people that turned the stuff in. So we can just look at it. All right, so on this one, this is the photo. I want to tell you, if we just look at the photo as an art piece, I think it's satisfying as an art piece just by itself. I love how the sunglasses are front and center, resting on branches, and I think that is just by itself is a nice image. I think that is really well done. And then we can look at this. Okay, so the person talks about how sunglasses normally used to protect your eyes, fashion accessory, but they're just regular sunglasses. And I like the title, View of the World. And I'll tell you a couple reasons why I like this title just off the top of my head is because there is a certain amount of ambiguity that pretty much forces engagement on the part of the viewer to start deciding for themselves what that title could mean. Are they talking, view of the world? Is the plant itself looking out through the sunglasses? Is a view of the world, is it referencing the sunglasses as a fashion object or as a piece of garbage thrown into the natural world? Is it inviting us to see ourselves in the mirror of the sunglasses? Is it anthropomorphizing nature? There's a lot of different questions we can ask because of that title, and I think that that is an excellent title. And then one of them is talking about they place on a bush so that it looks like the plant is looking out into the world. I like that because that is one of the things that this title calls to mind. But notice that whoever made this, that's not the only interpretation. They've left it open enough that you can bring your own meanings into it. And the contrast is there with the artificial lenses and natural greenery. And I like how this talks about seeing the world differently. But it's this idea is also a metaphor for multiple perspectives of human beings. I think that that's a really good one too. And then this last paragraph is really well done because it's own art piece because takes something completely ordinary and gives it new meaning just by changing where it's placed. I like that. So I think that this is kind of a fun image by itself, and you could blow that up and frame it as well, or use it as a reference point for doing a big style painting. But I think that this turned out and is very successful. Okay, now we're going to share another one. I want to look at that for just a second. Okay, my initial response to this would be an awful lot better with a better photo. And without looking at anything else. And the reason is we've got a windowsill here, we've got something right there blocking interrupting our plane, and it looks like it's just set on a table or something that's against a wall. And I would highly recommend that whoever took this photo take it to the photo lab or set up something else at home specifically to take a better photo of this. And I think you deserve, whoever turned this in, whoever this is, you deserve to take a better photo of it. So let's look at what they have written about it. Paragraph 1. So this is a cactus in a small cup, a living plant used for decoration, normally growing in desert environments. Okay. And used just a household knickknack. And then with the title Silent Survival, I love that. Again, we are ambiguous in the title, but it is also a very dramatic title. And I think that hearing that, seeing that right there, I think that that is that is what drives my initial reaction that this deserves a stronger photograph. Very much so. And so plain white surface near natural light, allowing shadows and contrast to highlight the shape and sharpen its texture. So this should be spelled sharpen, E-N. No changes made to the object, but it's isolated. Okay, if that's the case, what I would recommend then is setting up a better photo. See if we can move this table to hide this dark brown right back there. Move the table so that it's closer to a window so that we don't see the windowsill and that edging. And it may be that you have to move it to a different part of the room, move it in front of a glass door or something like that, so we can still see the natural light coming at it. But I think that this is rather distracting. But taking a photo of it with natural light, that might be a little bit of an issue. But I'm betting that taking a white sheet outside and putting it on a table and then photographing this on, like on putting a white sheet on a picnic table and then setting this up so that it is almost falling off the edge towards you. So you just have 6 inches between the edge of the table towards you and the rim of the cup. And then going in really close with your photo with your camera and taking a photo of it from above like this, angling it so that the light is still coming from that angle and it's outside. That way you'll be able to get, and you might even need to have a friend hold the other end of the sheet up so you can hide the background, but then you can get the natural light hitting it. It would still be on an infinity screen and it'd be a much more dramatic photo. And I think that this deserves a dramatic photo like that because I think it's a brilliant idea. And then it talks about recontextualizing it and presenting it in a new way that encourages the viewer to think differently about it. I think that's great. And it does really strongly encourage you just by that simple title and having the natural light encourages a different way of thinking about it. I think that that is a great idea. Totally nailed it on the 3 paragraphs. I would say do a little bit of brainstorming and see if we can get a better photo of this that really does a better job of demonstrating the power behind uh, your your ready-made idea. I think that that would be a really good idea. Okay, here's the next one that somebody turned in. We'll go down. The title is Royal Mirror. Okay. Now, looking at this right away, I think it's really interesting, and I like how this is set up. What I would suggest right away is smoothing out and just without, and maybe I'm wrong because I haven't read any of this, but we definitely need to get rid of this shadow right there. So, pulling this out and smoothing it out, or maybe even tightening it in a little bit. And these wrinkles at the bottom are a little bit distracting. And that may be part of the thing, but I don't think this part is on the top left. So definitely, um, I would recommend setting this up again and rephotographing it to get rid of that, or to even coming a little bit closer with the camera. So let's see what this has to say about it. The object is originally a napkin holder, and uh, with the function being that it's supposed to hold napkins. All right, great. And it's made of some sort of metal bent in a satisfying design. Yes, it is. It is well designed for and exactly for its purpose. But now we title it Royal Mirror. The napkins removed from its center, the mirror designs become much more clear. Um, okay, it's no longer to carry napkins, but is now meant, okay, so it's the shape of this that is intended to be examined more closely. And this looks very much like the crown on top of like a queen piece in chess. So yeah, definitely. I think that's really interesting. Okay, the napkin holder has now become its own art piece by the way it is framed and how its original function was removed. Okay, um, so I really like everything that they wrote for this. For this, though, if it is royal mirror, we want to give it an impression of royalty. I would say examine it a bit with the idea of photographing it to really demonstrate that royalty. And there's a couple things that I would suggest. One is smoothing out the sheet around it, so we get rid of these wrinkles, particularly this one in the upper left-hand corner and this one that's right underneath it. So I get rid of those, and then I would consider going to Deseret Industries, for example, see if you can find like a red napkin or a red handkerchief and putting that directly underneath this to give it kind of like the idea of sitting on a royal pillow, or even finding a royal looking pillow and setting it on that. Something that kind of suggests an element of a throne. And that would, I think, really elevate this quite a bit instead of just being the object itself. So I definitely considered doing that. But your write-ups um, have been spectacular. These are great. Okay, so we're doing the next one. Now, this I think is a pretty good setup, except I am kind of concerned about these wrinkles right here. I don't think it's as big of as a concern of that previous one because these are pretty well balanced. But if this person can slide the bowl closer to us and pull the sheet closer to us so that those wrinkles disappear, I think that this or aren't so dramatic. I think that this just the photo itself would turn out better. So let's read it. The object was originally a bowl and functioned, it's a clay bowl that did its function. And now its object is the obsolete. I like that. That's another dramatic title. You guys have been doing a great job with the titles because this title is, again, very ambiguous. What is it referencing? Is it what? There are so many things that it could reference. Place the bowl upside down, rendering its original purpose useless. Excellent. Hence the name. It is now a piece of art displayed for viewers to think of and ask questions about. Now, what does the obsolete refer to? Is the meal all done? Does it belong to a restaurant that is now out of business? Is the meal that it was designed to hold no longer part of anybody's habit? You know, there's a lot of things that it can suggest that I think are really interesting. Why is it obsolete? Is there a new model that came out? Are people switching away from bowls to plates? Or even better yet, is this a commentary? Could this potentially be read as a commentary on the shift to fast food consumerism, where everything that holds the food is disposable now? All the and that's what I love about this obsolete title. You guys are putting so much thought into these write-ups. It's really, really good. This is excellent. And talking about, why is it its own artwork? And talking a little bit about um, how the meaning, how by changing the context and the meaning, it has changed what this is. It's no longer functioning as a bowl at all. It can't because it's not useful as a bowl. So the function has to go somewhere else. But for this person, I love this idea. For this person, I would definitely reconsider or consider cleaning up the background in the photo and working on that a little bit. Now, if there's a specific reason for those wrinkles, that's something else. And if there is, that can be addressed in rewriting this a little bit. But for this assignment, the photo is just as important as the object that you're showing because that's how the object is presented. Okay, so the object is, okay, I do not see a title. So this person needs to generate a title. Okay, the object I chose was my shoe. Its purpose is to protect feet while walking. Okay. Oh, there is a title. The new title is Flower Vase. I put some fake flowers in it, so it also matches the color to make it look pretty. Of course, it cannot be a real vase since water would just run out of it, but it can be used for this purpose and the flowers will last longer. This is a ready-made. Okay, I think that this is really going in a good direction, and there are some things that I would recommend. First off, the background, I think this is great. There are some wrinkles, but that is totally fine. They aren't dramatically opposed to what you're doing here. However, there are a couple things that I would suggest. One is I would get rid of flower and I would just title it vase. And that's it. That's the first one. Second one, I would figure out a way to hold it so it's on its toe because vases are vertical and that would remove it from its usefulness as a shoe and add to the recontextualization. So I would do with this, I would stand it upright so that it is on its toe and then stand the flowers in it so it looks like they are standing upright like it is a regular vase. Have the straps facing the viewer. And there's a couple different ways to do this. One way is you could use pencils, and just in the side of it that is away from the viewer, put the pencils in so that they kind of they stand upright, pointing or one tip resting right here in the shoe, and the other tip resting on the sheet. There's other ways of doing that too, holding it upright. And I have seen people have done this before where they just used fishing line and held it up with fishing line and put stuff when they took the photo, they put other things in it, like the flowers, large enough in the frame that hid the fishing line. But there are a couple ways to do it. But I would do it so it doesn't show any additional creases in that sheet behind it. So I think that this is going in the right direction, but I think that the title needs to be a little bit more ambiguous, like we talked about, and I think that this needs to have a little bit more physical recontextualization, and standing it up on its toe would do that. So that the straps are facing us and the the sole of the shoe is facing away, and you can use sticks or skewers or something like that to prop it up for the moment you need to photograph it, so we don't see the sticks or skewers on our side. Hat pins is something else. If you set this up on a pillow and then get a couple, see if you can borrow a couple hat pins or even buy a few from Desert Industries, you can set those up, stab them into the pillow through the sheet, and then for the moments that it takes you to photograph this with the flowers, prop the shoe up. So we don't see the hat pins and we don't see any of the additional creases in the sheet. And I think that would work out really well. So I, I really am appreciating the kind of thought that you guys are putting into this, because this is not um, a really simple assignment. It can be, uh, but it can be simple just because you don't really think it through. And it's evident to me that you guys are really thinking this through on this. And I very much appreciate that. So I'm looking forward to seeing what else other people do with regarding the ready-mades and turning those in. So now we're going to look a little bit at the cocooning. And two of the people that in the background artists that did cocooning really well is, I want to mention that for the ready-mades, the two parts are you take the photo and write those 3 paragraphs, and then the second part of the assignment is you submit it so everybody else can see what you did. And for the cocoon, what we are going to be doing is taking an object and wrapping it. And I want you to wrap it to the point, and I do talk about this very specifically in here, but you are wrapping it to the point where the silhouette is not the same as when you started. And we're not talking about just a flat side view. We're talking about, 3-dimensional. And the reason why that is so important is I've had people who have cocooned, they've taken a wood, uh, like gingerbread man kind of shape, and wrapped a single layer of yarn around it. So you still see the wood shape very clearly. The silhouette is almost identical. What I want you to do though, if you're going to do something like that, take a single object and wrap it with yarn, wrap it with so much yarn that it starts looking like a Judith Scott type thing, where it almost looks like a straw spider's egg sac or something, where it no longer has any of that original shape to it. These are, Jason calls these stick Indians. In the Northwest, where he and I grew up, there are a number of native tribes that lived in the area. And there is this particular take on vampirism that is horrifying to me, which is that there are creatures that are basically made out, and this is Native American folklore from the region, from Washington State up to Alaska. There are creatures, supernatural creatures, that are made out of sentient sticks, and the sticks can twist and wrap around themselves until they become walking creatures, and they can mimic real animals, or they can be really weird things by themselves. But if they catch you, they will squeeze the life out of you and drain your blood. So just, yeah, horrifying. And Jason had a lot of nightmares about this. And so he started taking, when he was a young kid, and as an adult, he took really interesting shaped sticks and started wrapping them with plastic and tying them together to make these new, really interesting shapes. And some of them look like bundles of interesting colored sticks, and others of them start looking like creatures that almost could start walking around. These are the ones that kind of freak me out, the one on the right. But there's a couple things that I want you to look at. The entire object is covered. You notice that they are, in this case, they are bound together so they don't look like they originally did. Um, this one is problematic for this assignment for you guys, simply because we can still see the silhouette of the stick. For you guys, I would want you to use material that really changed that silhouette quite a bit, like something like this going on is good. But look at how intentional he is in use of color and material. Like this is blue plastic wrap, and then he tied them also together with an orange string using complementary colors. And he really uses a lot of complementary color ideas. And it isn't always a direct complement, but it's pretty close. Like he uses neon pink with this green, and this green is packing material that's there. Then this is strips of cloth and strips of I don't know. This might be cloth, but it almost looks to me like the yellow patterns that you find from craft and sewing stores. And it's just interesting to me how he combined those things and was very aware of colors, using primary colors on this one, lots of complementary colors on this. So just some really interesting combinations. Now, when you do this, you're going to collect some stuff together. You want to collect interesting things that you can wrap that mean something to you. And I mentioned Crystal and Scott right up there. And then also things to do the wrapping with that are interesting to you. And some of the things that people have used to wrap with have been books, items of clothing, toys that they grew up with, toys that have personal history and meaning to them, um, objects around the house that weren't specifically things that had history by themselves, but they represented things that were important to the person. Objects that looked interesting, fitting them together. You know, that you normally don't see these things together, or maybe they're objects that are collected around a theme. Like one of the really interesting ones is um, a woman in one of the classes collected a lot of makeup stuff from that was her own, but also a lot of her roommates and family members and friends that she knew, and that was what she used to wrap with around. That was the object that she wrapped, I should say, and just some really interesting stuff. And for materials to wrap, just in this, this has this red ropey string, blue plastic, like a shrink wrap on something. It says cloth or maybe those patterns from a craft store. This looks like strips of material. This is just that kind of shredded paper that you'd use to cushion things in packing. And this has a combination of these things, and maybe there's some electrical tape in there too. Garbage bags. Uh, several of these people have done things where they've crocheted stuff that they've used to help with the wrapping. Plastic garbage bags like this, uh, clothing that they bought from DI and then tore into strips and used that to wrap with, torn up sheets, tape, masking tape, electrical tape. One of the more interesting ones that somebody did was they took a teddy bear that they found from DI. They cut it open, took out some of the stuffing and filled it up with a metal wire, so as an armature that they could kind of bend. And then they wrapped the whole thing very tightly, put the stuffing back in, wrapped the whole thing very tightly with electrical tape. And they put nails and pins and stuff like that in it as they wrapped it up too, so they were sticking out, and it made a very disturbing looking um, vampiric slash goth teddy bear rabbit kind of thing that they could actually pose. And then they took a series of pictures as if the thing was walking around. Very, very disturbing. So, but there's lots of different kinds of things that you can use to both wrap and uh, as an object to be wrapped and do the wrapping. So I wanted to show you these examples. And these are from class. Okay, this is from our classes over the last couple of years. This person, what they did is got their roommates and friends that they knew to just donate stuff that was cluttering their desks that nobody knew what to do with. Nobody had thrown it away. And underneath all this is actually a backpack. So as they were wrapping it with string and power cords and charging cables and different stuff like that, as they were wrapping, they taped a lot of this stuff to the backpack and wrapped these cords around it. And they were very conscious of different colors. Here you have pink, yellow, red, orange, right through here. We have dark blue and purple. And they were doing that specifically to give this kind of vibrant rainbow type effect. But you can see, like, here's a rubber band ball that was on somebody's desk. Here's a little military action figure, a stopwatch. And I didn't ask when after they turned it in, cookie cutter, but I'm kind of hoping that they were able to get all these objects back to the people that they originally belonged to. So that the object that was being wrapped is a kid's backpack, and the material that was wrapped around it was all this detritus from different people's, abandoned knickknacks from different people's desks held together with the string of power cords, extension cables, and yarn. So really very interesting. A lot of interesting thought going into it, but it makes an object that is just really entertaining to look at. And this person was kind of channeling a couple different things, but they were thinking of Elana Tsui using garbage. And all this object is wrapped with is garbage that they found while they were going on different walks. And so that's one of the reasons why it's in front of one of these cheap garbage barrels that you see out in the middle of nowhere as a garbage can. And this person found a discarded elephant doll. And all of this wrapping is string that they found in garbage cans, garbage, looks like grocery bags that they kind of shredded and tore into strips to wrap with. But these are not just any grocery bags. These are grocery bags that they found again, either as litter alongside the roads or out of one of these abandoned garbage cans. And, and every element where they wrapped this discarded elephant toy up was with also garbage that they had found. And you can see the string. There's a baby sock right there over that foot. There's somebody's garbage that they used to wrap, but they used the discarded string. They wrapped it quite a bit with the shredded garbage bag. So it becomes really a fascinating object by itself. And then they took a picture of it laying next to a garbage can. So lots of layers of dealing with garbage. There's even wire from a discarded coat hanger. So very, really interesting, a lot of work and a lot of thought going into it. And this last object, one I want to show you is actually two images of the same thing. And you can see that this is right here. What this person was doing, in their state, and the thing that they wrote about it, they were just talking about just the process of living as expressed through the stuff that we do and hang on to take care of our clothes. And so they started off with a Walmart ironing board, an inexpensive ironing board. There's also a coat rack, one of those little movable coat racks that they have behind it. And the plastic from the on the ironing board is kind of draping over to the coat rack behind it. And on this, there are some things hanging down, and these are elements, not gloves or anything like that, but uh, like scarves kind of thing. And but they're scarves that are made out of um, newspaper that was spray painted. And the way that they did this, making that shape, is they spray painted the newspaper, rolled it up in a tube, and then cut down halfway through the tube. And then as they were loosening up and opening it up, you get these kind of funky shapes like this. And they just draped it over that. And you can see very clearly this is a regular shirt. And the plastic in this case is the plastic from a dry cleaner. And you can see that right there. And on this, they put some of the newspaper on the ironing board, wrapped it with some of the shrink wrap, plastic wrap, like you'd use at for packing a pallet. And then as they were doing that, they would do a layer and put some of the things around their apartment into it. And all these things have relations, direct relations to just the process of living. You know, there's a pamphlet from somebody, there's an AirPods case, there's a cassette, there's batteries, all sorts of little stuff like uh, a spool of thread. So a lot of different things like that. And they wrap this, they heat it up with a blow dryer to get it to kind of wrinkle and shrink down. And then they start wrapped another layer around it with some of these things held in place, hit it with the blow dryer again to kind of shrink it down, and did about 3 or 4 different layers like that, and adding different things to it, like these objects here, and then newspaper right here. And one of the last things they added were, again, the strips of newspaper like they have right here and right here. Just really interesting. And we can see the ironing board. We can tell it's an ironing board. But the way that they use that shrink wrap, it almost looks like it is um, like spider webbing, just what spiders would use. And I just think it's a really fascinating way of making this. So as you go through, really consider what you're putting into this. And it needs to be a minimum of 9 inches in the shortest dimension. So, consider that. If it's a stack of books, it needs to be a substantial stack of books because the smallest dimension is 9 inches. And this right here is about 16 inches on a side. This is about 14 inches tall. And for the submission on this part of it, what you're going to be doing is taking a photo and submitting the photo. And then the next part is you're going to write 3 paragraphs and you're going to be submitting that for the 3 paragraphs. So in this case, you're splitting it up. You're doing a photo of the object itself, and then you're doing a separate write-up instead of both the things at the same time. And right here, you're going to be submitting the photo and the write-up together in the discussion board so everybody can see it. So, and I think I'm going to probably revamp that. But one of the reasons why I kind of separated it out a little bit is that you do have a little bit more points. But I'm thinking what I'm going to do is in a future class, I'm just going to set it up the same way. So you have the photo and the write-up, and then the photo and the write-up shared out to the class. And I think I'm going to do the same thing right here. But until then, it is you do the photo and then you do the write-up separately. So and that's what that is there. And that way, this is 35 points for the colorful cocoon and 30 points for the ready-made um, conceptual piece. So it just, if you get confused about it, just email me or I'll tell you, oh, you need to submit this thing there. But for this first one, what you're going to be doing is just submitting the photo for the wrapped object. And for the concept, that's where you do the 3 paragraph write-up and you submit that write-up. And then for the discussion related to it, on this one, you're going to be submitting both the photo and the write-up. And I don't know let's see if you're supposed to write. You do not have to respond to anyone else's work in this, neither of these things. So hopefully you guys will do that, and we'll be able to look at a lot of them next week as people are getting done. If you have any concerns or questions about this, if it seems confusing at all, just let me know and I'll do my best to clarify. Now, we are coming in on the last quarter of the semester. What I would like everybody to do is double check all of your assignments, make sure that you've turned in everything you need to, and then go through and resubmit the things that you need to fix to get more points. I am more than happy to give more points whenever you resubmit something. So take care of that. If you have any questions, email me. And if I'm not responding to the email for whatever reason, look at the syllabus and just text me on my phone. If when you do text, please include your name and the class that you're in. And the section is X01 for this class. All right. Thank you guys. I hope you have a wonderful week and weekend. And this weekend is Easter. If you are a Christian and you celebrate Easter, happy Easter. And if you're not, happy weekend. Have a good weekend and enjoy the beginning of your spring. All right, guys, I will see you next week, and I hope you have a wonderful next several days.